Hi, and welcome to the Dingers Podcast, episode 66. I'm your host, Mitch. I'm here with my man, Jake. How are you tonight, Jake?
Doing well, man. Doing well. Really excited about our guest tonight. How are you doing, Mitch?
I'm doing pretty good because, going into today, knowing that Major League Baseball and the Players Association were going to meet today, I was not very optimistic about how this was going to go, especially after the owners came with their deal. I felt like the players were going to come back and be pretty, not lenient on what they were going to want. And to hear that, it was a heated discussion, but to hear that there was some headway made and that they're going to meet again tomorrow, like I'm feeling pretty good about that. Feeling pretty optimistic. It's like, deal's going to get done. I want it. So
Fingers
feeling
crossed.
pretty good.
Let's hope.
So yeah. Let's bring on Lance because we have a ton of questions and we want to just drink in his wealth of knowledge because he has a ton of it. So welcome to the show, Lance Brozdowski from this is fun. This is fun because you guys both have like really fun last names.
This is Brozdowski. It's super phonetical. I imagine I don't know if yours is phonetical too. Is it just Bujanowski?
No, the J is silent, so people have that J to trip over.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so it's Banowski. Yeah,
Banowski.
No,
man, they butchered.
One person my entire life's gotten it right, and I was like, man. How did you know?
Oh, they butcher yours a lot more than mine then. Yeah, for sure. Jeez.
Is that like a Polish? I was like looking it up. Is like the ski at the end, is that a Polish last name?
Yeah, SKI generally Polish, SKY generally Russian, from what I understand.
Yeah. That's the denoting that I've seen too.
Yeah.
Two Polacks. Love it.
It's fun. Yeah.
Well, Jake, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah. Lance, like I said in pre, thanks for joining us, man. I'm really excited to have you on. Obviously, Marquee Network contributor, more than contributor. What's your official title, Lance?
Yeah, multimedia producer is still my title. I think it might be changing up this year, but for now, multimedia producer.
That's exciting stuff. Well, we'll get to that. I kind of want to start with just kind of taking us through how you got to Marquee. Obviously, you've got some really impressive journalistic experience from Razzball, Baseball Prospectus, even to the AP. But I'm most curious about Driveline Baseball. Can you talk to us a little bit about your experience and how you ended up as a video editor with Driveline?
Yeah. Driveline was great. I'm actually wearing a Driveline shirt right now. It's pretty funny. I love those guys. Every single one of them has been an incredible resource to me in understanding more things about baseball. I'm indebted to so many guys there. I was at the American Baseball Coaches Association conference the other weekend, and I met up with some guys I hadn't seen in forever, or never met actually, because I was remote. So they're out in Seattle. I'm from Connecticut, so I was back to them. But yeah, that link up was very random. I was doing a story I was looking for the Associated Press, doing a story on Luke Jackson, and from the Braves reliever, really good guy. Trained at Driveline for a little bit. He and I chatted in the Wrigley clubhouse, actually away clubhouse. We were talking through his slider change, and I just we vibed, and I was like, I want to do more on this. So I ended up connecting with his trainer at Driveline, Bill Hazel, and and I hit it off. And then they were like looking for someone with Adobe experience on the Premiere side, just being able to edit video, and they needed to stitch together Edgertronic camera footage. So like literally that slow-mo camera stuff you see in pitch design sessions that most organizations utilize. They needed to stitch that to Rapsodo TrackMan reports. So like being able to tell, because like none of these systems are synced up, which is kind of like a dirty little secret of a lot of the tech in baseball is it's all like by individual companies. So the integration of them is kind of a pain. But this was prior to Driveline releasing Track and some other things that I think cleared up this issue. But yeah, I was literally just stitching. I was watching Edgertronic footage of pitchers and stitching it back to the TrackMans and basically putting together these small videos packages for guys as they went away from Driveline, so went into the season to help them maintain stuff. So say they came there and worked on a slider and they changed the shape from X to Y. We'd show a split up of those two grips and what they're doing Q-wise, what the movement difference was, so they'd be able to go back to it. And it's just it was a really cool job. It was just awesome to be able to expose myself to some of those things on a non-team level. And I imagine a lot of stuff that I was looking at is very comparable to what teams look at. So I've seen TrackMan reports. I've seen all that stuff. It really helped me kind of just advance my knowledge. It also helped me allow me to pick the brain of a lot of people who have now moved on to assistant pitching coaching roles and a lot of other cool roles. Yeah. Daniel Moskos, actually, the assistant pitching coach for the Cubs, was one of the individuals I worked with. So that was really cool to see him get a scoop from the Yankees. Yeah, so I'm really excited. We chatted, I want to say like maybe a month or two ago or something. I'm really excited to run into him in Wrigley Field and stuff and chat more. But he was fun to work with, and a bunch of other guys. They churn out so many people there that get scooped up by major league organizations that like it's like the people I worked with are no longer there, and then they have a whole new wave of people. So it's good to like keep networking and like keep in touch with the guys there, because I know the guys there then will eventually go to teams most likely. So
yeah, it's nuts. It seems like every offseason there's another coach hired from Driveline or one of the Driveline competitors. It's nuts. I mean, it shows how technology has influenced the game, and that's something that obviously we want to get into with you. But I have to comment. I mean, how many people can say that they got a job through connection with a Major League Baseball player like Luke Jackson?
Yeah, it's so weird. Like, he kind of got it. He didn't like explicitly recommend me, but like Bill knew who I was from our interaction, because I was like, wow, I just feel like Bill explained everything to me so coherently. I was like, I have to keep in touch with him and like use him as a resource when other things come up on the pitching side I need to understand. And then that came full circle. So yeah, in a way, I guess Luke Jackson led me to Bill, which led me to Driveline, which led me to you're framing it more and more better than maybe I would, but that's nice of you.
No, man. I mean, it's very cool. I'm envious. I have a journalism background, so I'm super envious of all of you. I snooped on your LinkedIn profile, obviously, to get some of that info. To see the stops that you took is awesome. Like, I mean, that's something that, like, when I went to journalism school, I was like, that's what I want to do. And I've since gone out into graphic design, but it's cool that I get to be on the podcast with Mitch and the Dingers crew. But you kind of talked a little bit about Driveline, but I feel like there are a lot of fans out there who definitely don't know what Driveline is, and are familiar with like the Cubs pitch lab and kind of have a sense of what's going on behind the scenes. I think as Cubs fans, we're really lucky. Sahadev Sharma for The Athletic does a really great job of diving into that data. And then, of course, Bleacher Nation kind of regurgitates that and puts it into lay terms for some people. But could you kind of give us like a sense of what, like an overview of like if a pitcher is going to Driveline? I'm sure like obviously there are a bunch of different things that they could be working on, but could you kind of give us like a little overview for fans that maybe don't know what Driveline is? What kind of goes on there?
Yeah. I think simply put, it's a third-party player development company, and the reason they exist is pretty simply that they think they can develop players better than maybe some major league organizations can, or at least, I think, in a general sense, provide more specific training. I think that's a big issue, which you run into some of the differences in organizations. You have like coordinators at the top generally for like pitching coordinators and such. In the Cubs organization, for example, will try to push theories and ideas down as to what they think would be successful to coaches and stuff, and then that gets communicated to the player. So communication is massive in any work field, but especially in baseball and player development. So whenever there's lapses in those systems, especially team to team, it obviously varies heavily team to team and their efficiency and ability to develop players. Driveline can step in as like a third party, as like instead of a guy training at a general facility, say he wants to change something to get exceptionally better. Say he's kind of like that fringe quad A guy, and he realizes that he's maybe on his way out. And he needs to develop something that's a little bit of an outlier trait. There's a variety of these companies. Like Driveline is one of them, the most popular, because I think that they build systems better than anybody else on the third-party player development side of things. But Tread Athletics, X2 in Arizona is super popular, and there's a ton of these companies that train players. And I think at the end of the day, it's really about with relationships the player has with the coach, because I think that's a huge thing that's kind of maybe overlooked a lot. Is like, why does one player go to one org and be successful? Like, I think the one that we always hear all the time is like Glasnow. It's like, wow, what if the Pirates kept Glasnow? It's like, well, the principal argument there that everyone overlooks is that the Pirates just didn't have the development in place that the Rays had. So if the Pirates kept Glasnow would probably be a fringe starter until he was traded into another org. And Pirates are obviously getting a lot better on that side with hiring Sherrington and such. But like the systems that teams have in place, and this is things they do well. Like some teams are better, I think, at adding certain pitches, and generally this is reflected in what they tend to acquire. The Cubs have a bit of a slant towards sinker changeups, I think, in the minor leagues. And, is that because they think those pitches are better, or is that because they think they could develop sliders? Like there's a lot of theory around there. I think depending on who you talk to, you might get different answers and such. And maybe there isn't a direct answer. But I don't know if I got off topic there, but Driveline is really, I don't want to go through like the whole process, but it comes down to understanding the athlete. There's movement screenings, strength screenings, and all these things to make sure that like what they're trying to coach a guy to do, their body can actually physically is able to do. I think that's another thing that's often overlooked a ton is like, I think in super low levels, like let's talk high school level, like you'll run into issues all the time where coaches will try to cue athletes in a certain way. Then their body literally just cannot move in that way. You know what I mean? Like watching video of a guy like a Yu Darvish, in terms of how well he separates up down the mound and how good extension he gets and his control of his own body. That's something you can aspire to be when you're a 17-year-old pitcher in high school, but like, you cannot move like Yu Darvish. Like if you're moving like Yu Darvish, then you're Shohei Ohtani. You know what I mean? So it's like you're an elite high school player, like a Jack Leiter, I'm sure, coming out of high school was probably that way. But again, it's just like they do a really good job understanding athletes and pushing them towards goals. And again, a super interesting part of it is understanding like what to do with a player. I think is another thing. It's like, depending on slot, depending on a variety of things, like do you want to get to a guy to this certain pitch characteristic area, or even more generally, like if you're trying to improve an athlete's efficiency or their ability to transfer energy through their kinetic chain to potentially throw harder, you can do that in a variety of ways. You can play with a variety of things if a guy's efficiency isn't really, really high. And it's like a matter of what you want to tweak, how that tweak may affect other things. Like it's very, very philosophical. I think that's the fun from what I've heard from a lot of coaches is like positing on what to change, based on how difficult that change would be, based on the potential reward, based on the residual components of what would happen after the fact of that change, how successful you will even be in making that change, which gets back to the athlete buy-in side of things. There's just so many layers. And Driveline just does a really good job building systems in terms of being able to communicate all the information down. And that's why I think they become so popular. And so many teams have vultured guys all over the place from their team out there in the Seattle area, greater Seattle area.
Since you brought up high school, I'm a former high school baseball coach. I was a head baseball coach for like 5-6 years, and especially living in Iowa, it's really hard for high school baseball players in the state of Iowa, because we're one of the only high school that plays baseball in the summer. It's not a fall sport, it's a summer sport, is to get high school players, one, to be seen, and one, to bring the technology to them. Because really the only thing that in the state of Iowa's have is we have perfect games in Cedar Rapids, but there's not a lot of facilities. So my question is, when do you see like Rapsodo and these type of technologies become more affordable and to the level where a parent or a high school coach could buy them and be able to implement them into being able to get all the data and analytics that they need to make good decisions and to be able to help high school players make growth?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know if I have enough understanding of the cost of a variety of these things. I know that a lot of those companies' missions are to push this stuff down to the really low levels, because I think at the end of the day, when you have it in more people's hands, you tend to see more reaction to it and more learning from it. I think this is an issue we're running into a bit with Hawkeye right now, is where it's only sectioned off to the 30 major league parks. So you're only able to get in-game data. So guys aren't able to train on the side, from what I understand. I don't know if any facilities like the pitching lab, I would assume the pitching lab for the Cubs does not have Hawkeye set up. But yeah, it's like, that's a huge issue, because like you're running into different ways of capturing data between the major league level when you're on the mound in game versus then when you're capturing it in pens and such, which a lot of training in variety of different skill improvement characteristics like that comes into play then. It doesn't really come into play when you're on the mound. You know what I mean? You prep, the process is what you put the time into such that you're then able to go perform. These guys aren't tweaking pitches mid-game and trying funky pitches and pitch designing in game. So that creates a bit of an issue. But illustrating that back to your point, I think at the end of the day, it's a huge issue, because a lot of the tech is incredibly expensive. There's a lot of R&D that goes into the tech, which is going to always keep that cost really, really high. So I don't even think I have a good answer for that question. I think there's probably a lot of other people out there that would be better suited to answer a question like that. But it's a limitation of this for sure. I think you're seeing a lot. I think over the last probably 10 years, there's been relatively exponential growth in the amount of collegiate, and I'm not even talking D1, I'm talking like D2, D3, JUCO level that have TrackMan setups. And I think at the end of the day, like TrackMan is becoming a bit of a standard from what I understand. There's a lot of issues with Rapsodo to some extent, and TrackMan has a bit of an optical mobile unit, which again, the cheaper you're going to, the more you're running into probably some data error, which creates a huge problem for actually trying to do things accurately. And, it creates a lot of moral issues of like, should they even be selling it if it's only like 85 or whatever percent? Again, I'm making up numbers here. 85% accurate, every 10th pitch you're missing, it's telling you something wrong. Like that could really affect the training side of things, especially if that's your only resource and you're learning and maybe your coaches aren't particularly educated on how to utilize those various tech. But it's a great question. Yeah, it's something that I imagine all these companies are trying to answer. I don't know how good my answer is to it though, unfortunately. Yeah.
My follow-up to that is, so we talked a little bit before off camera, before the podcast, about technology is really advanced when it comes to the pitching side of things.
Yeah.
Do you see in the next few years that being caught up in the hitting side, where we will see an advancement in that? Because right now in the game of baseball, pitching, it definitely has the advantage. Like they're throwing harder, they're keeping batters way off balance, and it's like the hitters are just behind right now. And we understand there's an ebb and flow there that kind of goes back and forth. The hitters will catch up eventually and get used to it. But do you see that technology starting to be put in to help the hitters?
Yeah, I think so. I think it comes down to, again, a lot of variables in this. I think the key thing to understand is just that the reason I think at least pitching has gone to where it has gone to is because in the batter-hitter interaction, the pitcher is always going to have the initiative. So the ability to take that as much as game replica as you can and take that out of the pitching scenario and put it into a practice setting where you can train it is much easier than taking the hitting side of things and bringing it out, particularly because it's really hard to get good live pitching to face, you know? And also because, like, generally most machines aren't replicating actual pitch movement for the most part. Like, it'll replicate high efficiency pitches, but it has a difficulty replicating sliders and other things because of how they move, which is a topic I'm not really going to get into, but it's a huge thing in baseball. There's Ben Lindbergh of The Ringer wrote a really good story on it that kind of talks through it. I highly recommend anyone jumping in and checking that out if they're interested in some nerd stuff. But that's kind of the main problem is, like, and you're seeing the push towards this now more is, like, practice how you play, like a huge focus on the hitting side of, like, replicating in-game movement in in-game environments, and even environments even more difficult than that, as much as possible. So that is like a huge push from the hitting coaches I've talked to. I've really tried this offseason to kind of expand my understanding of the hitting side. I'm still doing as good of a job as I can of trying to distill some of that information down so I'm comfortable then communicating it back to the public, which is always kind of the crux on all this, is, like, I try to get really deep such that I have all the follow-up questions answered before I go out and say, like, you know, I'm starting to learn about, like, different classes of hitting philosophy and how contrasting they are. And, like, the fun thing is when the guys are like, oh, they're all saying the same thing, they're just saying it in a different way. And, like, you get into so many different, like, Teacher Man. I don't know if anyone's read Jared Diamond's Swing Kings. That's a really interesting book. That's a good kind of high level macro concept of, like, what goes on in the hitting world. But do I think it'll catch up? I think it will, but I think it comes down to the training side. I think that there are a lot of hitters, from what I understand, that just don't get super uncomfortable. And this is a common thing you're going to hear a ton, is just comfortability, and making yourself uncomfortable in the box will then create better in-game results. And I've seen this with a couple minor leaguers in terms of their turnaround. I've talked to someone, followed some in terms of this turnaround they've specifically made. But yeah, it's just easier, I think, on the pitching side to replicate the training elements such that you're then able to practice in different ways, practice more difficulty. That initiative the pitchers have is so huge, and the reactionary element of hitting is very, very difficult. So I think they're always going to be a bit behind, which is maybe a little bit of evidence for the league potentially stepping in and doing something to try to balance it out. But I do think there is a natural ebb and flow to this. We've seen it over the last couple of years too, with, like, if you just look at, like, upper part of the zone, high fastball swing rates, they've gone down over the last couple of years among hitters, which is, it's really small margins, but that's kind of telling you to some extent that hitters are understanding how to lay off those pitches because they're really difficult to do damage on. So maybe some of that effectiveness on the fastball side is going away. I got a friend who was super into basketball, and there's been, like, the three-point revolution kicked up. And now this year, there's actually been a bit of, like, the two-point efficiencies kind of, from what I understand, jump back up. Like, efficient two-pointers are much more popular. And it's just an ebb and flow. You know what I mean? Like, I think when that happened in basketball, everyone was like, we should make a 4-point line or move it back or something. And that's kind of what we're running into at baseball, which in my mind just makes me think that in the next 1 to 2 years, we might just have a little bit of ebb back into the point where maybe it's like hitting pops a little bit more. But the style of hitting is also a problem too. Like, I would say, like, offense, it feels like it's down, but it feels like it's down because of the kind of offense you get rather than, like, it's not like we're in I don't think we're in a dead ball era, really, right?
Or
like,
we could just play with two different balls.
Exactly, which is kind of pretty much did that. I mean, last year, based on what I understand. But yeah, the ball's another thing, and that's on the pitching and the hitting side. It's like hitters aren't going to consistently know how pitches move, and pitchers aren't going to know how consistently they move either. So you're running into massive problems. And it's just like, there's so many things in that. But yeah, I think it will catch up in some. I don't know how much it will catch up. I think pitchers will always have an advantage because of that training element of being able, how much easier you can replicate in-game scenarios as a pitcher than you can as a hitter.
Yeah, I think that's a really good distinction. You bring up a lot, man. You bring up a lot of stuff, and there are a lot of questions I want to ask. And we only have an hour, yeah, man, this is good info. One other thing I'm curious about too. Like, obviously now you you're in a setting working with the Cubs, talking to the minor leaguers. I watched a bunch of your interviews. I love the Ryan Jensen interview, which begs the question. Talk to us about how your experience at Driveline and all your cumulative experience, of course, but just because we been talking about Driveline and the analytics and technology, how does that inform the way you approach these conversations that you're having with Cubs minor leaguers now?
It's huge. It's essential. I think that one of the key things I have as like a pie in the sky thing down the road in my career, whether it be in specifically on the media side or wherever I end up, like I think that there needs to be more people who understand things that potentially might go to the two teams. Like I think that's the main problem on the media side with baseball is we have a lot of people who are really intelligent who end up going team side as opposed to a lot of people who end up media side. And I've had opportunities to go team side, and I really feel passionately about the media side and trying to change things.
We're thankful you're on the media side because you're absolutely right that we need people like you breaking it down for us.
I just think that there's so much opportunity for that. I think down the road you're going to see a massive wave of just really smart coordinators and coaches coming out of baseball and potentially going to the media side, and that will change coverage because you'll have more informed analysis, I think, than we have currently gotten. And this isn't to say that like the majority of analysis out there is poor. I think Boog and JD do an incredible job in Marquee broadcast. I think they're like Joe Davis is incredible. Most color analysts, I don't mind. Like I think they're good, but I do think again there's a lot of opportunity to insert. And this will naturally happen as like the players who are currently playing now that have interacted with this tech come out. But I think there's an opportunity to speed that up and not have to wait 15 years to get.
Well, it's going to take
like
the fans getting curious. The fans are going to continue to get curious about it too.
Exactly.
I think a lot of it right now, obviously, the fan base skews older.
It does for sure.
I think you and I. I'm 28. I think you and I are around the same age.
27,
and I think, okay, so I think like our generation, and then of course the younger generation, growing up with technology and being exposed to potentially this technology at a younger age and being fans of the sports, they're going to demand color commentators who understand what's being looked at on the technological side and analytical side. And I think that's a really great point that you bring up. And I'm excited at the prospect of people that are in organizations coming out and sharing all of that information with us.
Yeah, and we've seen it a little bit. We've seen like Goldstein at Fangraphs pop out and stuff, and he's got a really good understanding of what's going on. Like there's a variety of guys like that, but I think that again, like one thing that I've kind of in my head sorted out in the last couple of years is like I think a lot of people are going to the written side naturally, and I actually wanted to be a beat writer out of grad school and stuff, and I thought that was my path. But the more I've like interacted with a lot of these topics, the more I think it's really, really difficult to communicate these things in the written word. And especially the more I've heard about other people who are the same way as visual learners, and especially how many players I've talked to that are visual learners. Like they're very like the reason that I think those stories always pop every year of like this player is reading this book or this or that, or like gets really technical or is nerdy. Those stick out because the majority of baseball players are probably visual learners who don't read 100 books a year like the Sean Doolittles of the world. You know what I mean? So like they absorb information differently. And I think that it's easier to communicate a lot of these topics visually. So that's why I write and I still write. I still like writing, but I really have pushed towards the video side, I think recently in the last year. And I'm going to keep going with that. It's just like a medium that I think will work.
I'll pump your tires a little bit that you do a very good job of communicating it very eloquently and very easy for the layman to be able to understand and get into what you're talking about. Like I've had numerous different Cubs fans I've talked to. When you did the interview with Owen Casey and you did the interview with DJ Hers and those, it's like they loved that. They won because that time in the Cubs season, they really were wanting those minor league just little peek-ins, and you gave that and you provided great information for us to be able to see that. So you do a great job of communicating that, and we need that.
I appreciate that a ton.
So let's dig a little bit into the Cubs minor league system, and then we'll move on to the major league system. So we're really interested in Caleb Killian. Killed it in the AFL. Can you just dig into where do you think do you see him penciled in as a big league debut maybe in the 2022 season, or do you see that maybe 2023? Where do you see his trajectory?
Yeah. I'd say I'm not the best at predicting timeline on things just because I think that I think a lot of people put probably too much into that as opposed to the analysis itself. It's like guys get called whenever an injury can happen. Next thing he's up and he shoves and he sticks. You know what I mean? It's like, does your ETA 2023 late really matter? But so I don't really get into the timeline things. I think Killian's good. I think he's a really interesting pitcher. Mixes a lot of pitches. He runs into a thing that I think is going to be pretty popular in the coming year, which is related to like intended zones. So I think for a while on any communication of baseball information, we run into the idea of like command. This guy had his command. This guy did not have good command. And I think so much of baseball has become objective, forcing us to like look at the numbers to back up statements like that. That command, for the most part, I think over the last couple of years has stayed in this ethereal realm of just like whatever happens, happens. Like we think it was good command or not. It's like an easy excuse to plug in that you don't really need to back up with data. And we're starting to see now that companies like Driveline and other organizations are utilizing information that comes from these data sources like Stats LLC, which is based in Chicago. Inside Edge is another one, not super known maybe to most people, but they're stat providers that MLB teams purchase from. And some of the data that they've been tracking over the last couple of years is known as intended zone data. So what it is it's literally people going in and plugging in where they think the pitcher wanted the pitch to go. And then by looking at what the result of that actual pitch was and calculating the difference, you could come up with the miss patterns for pitchers. So you can actually objectively tell how much better someone is at commanding their specific pitches or general repertoire than other pitchers in baseball. And I think that is incredibly important just from an understanding standpoint of getting us to, like, Kyle Hendricks is a great example. Let us understand how good at commanding baseball he is. And it backs him up in spades from the data I've seen. Like, he's really good at it. And how good is he? And on a specific start, can we actually attribute it to command, or can we attribute it to something else? Was it mechanical? Do we think it was mechanical? That's something that might be really difficult for us to ever understand. But just by adding another 5 to 10% of knowledge of this command side, even if there's some error in the data, it's huge. And getting back to Killian here, is like, I think for the most part, I haven't seen his minor league command data, but I imagine it pops really, really well. And this is something that I think for the most part, the Cubs have had a bit of a slant towards, which is interesting. I don't know if they just think it's really difficult to train. My theory is that they probably think it's difficult to train because for the most part, we don't really have an understanding of what makes good command. You will hear a lot of times that consistent command mechanics make good command. But from my understanding, there's actually no studies. There's no medical research or anything that command is actually a predictor of, of good consistent mechanics are a predictor of being able to locate the ball well, because there's so much subtle variation at your fingertips when you release that creates massive misses. So you could have the most perfect mechanics in the world, but like you could still also probably have bad command. And I think that we often conflate those two, where we see bad mechanics or weird mechanics and we're like, man, he just doesn't have good command. It's like, well, maybe he's actually transferring energy efficiently and it's bad command. We have to figure out something. Or maybe he has great command but poor mechanics. Like, there's a lot of these instances, and obviously this is like teams with the Rays exploit this stuff really well. They understand the difference between the two and are able to kind of distill it all down. So I really like Killian. I think that he fits in that window of having a bit of an outlier skill and being able to control the zone really well. I would imagine if you saw eventually his intended zone data, which I think might become a little more public in the coming years, he's a guy that will pop on that and will probably end up top 25 percentile. Be pretty good. Like, I think he's a command-based pitcher. And that leaves a bit of an issue because I think there's a lot of guys who have gone more towards stuff. You hear, like, the Reds organization is a great contrast. Most of the guys in that pen are stuff-based. Most of the starting pitchers in that rotation, Sonny Gray, Tyler Mahle, are stuff-based. When they bring up Lodolo and Hunter Green, those guys are going to be stuff-based. Stuff-based, I mean pitch movement based on their arm slot, et cetera, velocity, and like tying all those together and coming up with a number of how good that is. Whereas Killian doesn't really pop on any of those things. What he pops on, again, is the command side of things. So you run into like different kinds of error that I think he'll run into as a pitcher. Like he may just not have his command one day and just get torched. But again, you run into stuff guys. Like, maybe the margin of error there is different. They don't have stuff on the given day. So I think to tie it all together is, like, I think that defense is a key thing that will impact him, and also a guy like Marcus Stroman a lot coming forward in the coming years. Infield defense shifting, understanding how to play. I also think getting buy-in on everyone of understanding the scouting report in terms of how a hitter's being pitched to elicit a certain kind of ground ball and positioning players as a result of that. So I think there's a lot of factors out of Killian's control that will influence how he pitches, which for the most part is kind of pitching at the end of the day, as you guys might know. But yeah, he's a good pitcher. He's really interesting. He misses a ton of pitches. He's a fun guy to talk to. I know he's been tinkering with his changeup for the 2 times I talked to him last year in Tennessee when he got traded, and then in the AFL, he tried a couple grips out. He's been playing with that. I still think he's primarily probably like a sinker cutter guy with a good curve. As a whole, the velocity isn't there from a stuff perspective, so that's another interesting card. You know, I'd love to see him add some velo. I'd love to see him become like a higher 90s guy or like a mid 90s consistently.
What's he sitting right now?
I got my data here. Let me pull it up. I can get some objective info here, which I've been talking about. What do I have on him? I have him at 94 with the sinker at 92.3 or 92.9. So, yeah, he's in the 94, 93, which is kind of average major league velocity. And I think that could work at the end of the day. The cutter's in like the low 90s as well. Curveball velo is like 79 or 78 is what I have. Obviously, some of this information could have changed. But yeah, he's an interesting guy. I think, again, it doesn't pop on any of the stuff metrics, but I think he's a guy maybe like a Chris Bassett type, where maybe there's enough deception in that delivery such that you could actually elicit some better results than the stuff we'll say. He could be a consistent outperformer of his FIP. But he feels like a really high floor arm for me coming from the San Francisco system.
That's what we like to hear. I mean, we're going to get into it. We've been dying for homegrown pitching for a long time. The closest thing that we've had recently, even though we did trade for him, but he feels homegrown. He's been around for so long. Kyle Hendricks. You kind of touched on him. Do you have a sense for what's your faith that Kyle Hendricks is going to be able to have a bounce back next season? Can you kind of see what went wrong for him in the 2021 season?
I looked at this right before Mitch mentioned Kyle Hendricks, and I just pulled up some of the data quick and was looking at pitch movement and stuff. I was wondering if anything changed there. He had a really bad year. I didn't realize how bad of a year he had. I watched a lot of his starts too. And I feel like I ran into some starts where he actually pitched well. So there's clearly something still in the tank, but there's really no positives to take from this year, which is really odd. I didn't see too much in the data on the pitch side that changed drastically, such that it was creating different pitch shapes, or like he'd lost velo, or maybe he lost a little command. I think that aging, because we don't have this command data, aging of command is something that's really interesting. I always speculated that it got better, a little bit of survivorship bias of guys who, if you're in the league until you're 35, you probably have some semblance of command, or you're out of the league when you're 30, when your command goes and your stuff, you know what I mean? So it's like a Verlander, all these guys who are old, like Jamie Moore. Why was Jamie Moore in the league really long?
Right.
Probably because he had really good command, there's a lot of bias in older guys having good command. Bartolo Colon's another great example. So I think for the most part that Hendricks will be fine. I guess that's a weird take, but it's funny because I feel I
agree.
Step back and look at the data, and it's like, Jesus Christ, what happened? But I do remember multiple starts last year where it was just he was fine. They faced a weak AL Central, I think, too, which maybe helped them a little bit in some of those starts. Ton of home runs, which is the same thing Alzolay ran into. I think that maybe gets back into some of the batted ball environment stuff with Wrigley Field, which I believe some stuff was published on. I don't want to set up top of my head because I don't remember specifically, but I guess I trust him. I think he's a guy that utilizes seam-shifted today wake really well, which is this concept of being able to understand how the ball moves a little bit differently than we tracked it for the last however many years, because of how the air flows around it is potentially influenced by the seams a little bit. So he utilizes that really well, which is, I think, something a lot of teams are trying to get a better understanding of and be able to utilize in pitchers. And again, the command's good. He still pops in all the command metrics I've seen. I chalk it up to a weird year, but I imagine even with slight home run regression, he comes back down to maybe a 3.6 ERA guy. And he's hopefully the 1 or 2 in the rotation. So I still have faith in him. I don't know if it's unfounded. He just was really bad last year, and I can't figure out why. There's nothing there for me to be he didn't really have the curve. I know the curve faded a lot, but the velo was fine. That hasn't aged. It's kind of ticked up over the last couple of years, which is weird.
I'm curious. I know one thing that's been discussed in pitching over the last couple of years. You talked about high fastballs, and how hitters are just kind of wisening up to that and laying off if they're good at adapting, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
I remember reading something probably it might have even been 2019, a Sahadev Sharma piece, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
He was talking about Hendricks working the sinker up in the zone more, which I always thought was funny. I'm a big MLB The Show player, and you get spammed sinkers up in the zone. I don't know if you've ever played. But I was like, oh man, there might be some credence to this, and it's something that I noticed Hendricks, I think, start doing more in 2020. I'm curious if the location data is on there. We don't have to unpack it right now, but that was kind of one of the things that I was thinking about last year. But it's just, Hendricks is my personal favorite player, and so to have him struggle last year, he's super fun to watch. He's so methodical. He's so thoughtful about the process. It's great to watch interviews of him. But on top of everything that happened last year, for Hendricks to struggle is just okay, ready for 2022.
I even remember there was an interview with him and Noble towards the end of the season where they were both kind of we don't know, we're doing the same exact things. We just aren't getting the results that we were getting before. And so,
it's tough. I don't know what to chalk it up to. I'd be really interested. Maybe they have more information there than they're giving you, which they probably do. Which I think it went back to a lot of mechanics and stuff in season, which gets back to the whole idea of do mechanics actually influence command that much? I think they do to some extent. I think there's enough players saying it such that there's probably something in the data. We just don't have good data to back it up. They take it with the mechanics, but I don't think they really saw too much of a result. It's just, he's a weird case, man. I don't know. I think maybe it just goes back to the whole idea of if command is super finicky and maybe it's not as consistent year to year, then like if he's missing his spots slightly, then like he's putting himself in like large danger areas. And maybe there was just a higher conversion of those large danger area pitches. Like you take however many pitchers in the league and you have them all throw league average fastballs down the middle of the plate, they're going to get different results in who's actually capitalizing on those pitches. But there's a good chance you're just experiencing some random variance here on the homer side, where he gives up a lot of home runs because he's just running into some pitches where maybe he's not locating them as well, and then they're ending up in higher danger areas, and then those hitters are converting on him. I seem to remember this in a Brave start that he had maybe Sunday Night Baseball. He got hit really hard, really early. It's like that stuff tough for me. It's like if like I don't expect him to have those many blow up games again, and if teams are just able to capitalize on those small innings where his mechanics are off or he's missing location again, like this would be something we'd be able to look at is see like that Brave start and see like based on his intended zone, was he missing 3, 4, 5 inches more than he normally does? So then you could go, okay, like this is a decent explainer. What's going on here? Like that's a key thing. I as opposed to just anecdotally thinking he misses spots more, it's like maybe we could actually look at it. And if it's not that, then it like really makes us go, what's really happening? Yeah. But yeah, I think he'll be good. I don't know. I guess I take the large sample of like what he's done. I'm not sure what the Seamer projections are on him right now.
Oh, I haven't checked those.
Seamer projections don't like him at all. So that's
I feel like maybe I did see that in passing.
Yeah,
I've been all over that for fantasy baseball.
I don't think he's done. He's only 32. Like the velo's still there. Like I think he's going to be okay. I think you maybe end up with something more like a 2019 season. He was like a 3-4. Well, let's say like a 3-7. I bet he's like in between a 3-7 and a 4, which is very much probably on the under of whatever prediction he has. But I think he's such a good field pitcher that like I imagine he figures something out, whether it be pitch shape or the ability to capitalize some more extra movement via like something like a seam effects or a seam shifted wake. I wouldn't be shocked if he's back to being fine next year.
Before we get back into the minor leagues, I do want to touch on Edbert Alzolay.
Yeah, for sure.
Man, like his stuff is nasty, but he really struggled this year. And you saw it with the lefties. Left-handed batters just crushed him, and he gave up a ton of dingers. And so what do you think? Is it pitch mix? Is it just learning something, a different pitch to be able to really go after lefties? What do you see in Alzolay, and how is he going to make the next step forward in his growth this next season?
Yeah, he's a fun one because we've been talking, I feel, about command with Killian and Hendricks, and even like you could track that to Mills and Davies and stuff. And like Alzolay is kind of the opposite. Alzolay is like a stuff guy where his slider is like legitimately one of the better sliders in baseball in terms of how it grades out. He has like a really interesting ability to get a little bit of vertical movement. So like that pitch ends up a little bit higher in the zone than you'd expect and takes off laterally. He's devastating versus right-handed hitters. I don't think he has any problem there at all. So I think personally, like it's maybe a little bit overblown to think that he should like get better at his changeup or like mixing the curveball more, mixing all these pitches more. Like I legitimately think if you did exactly what he did last year as a starting pitcher and just copy pasted it into next year, like you'll just catch some decent regression on the homer side of things. He was giving up 1.79 homers per 9, which is I imagine is probably top 5 to 10 in baseball last year. That's a ton. I imagine that just comes down naturally to maybe like 1.3-ish, and then you're probably looking at a guy who's like flat 4 ERAs, absolutely nasty versus righties. I really like the concept of adding cutters to a repertoire from a perspective, and so you'll see like these lateral sliders that all the guys are throwing now. They're known as like sweepers. You're going to probably start to hear it this year. Pitches that basically sweep across the zone, have a ton of horizontal movement, are some of the most effective pitches you can throw right on right. So this is why Alzolay slider works really well. He throws it hard, a little bit of that vertical movement, creates some kind of unexpected movement. It doesn't look like a lot of other sliders, and it moves a lot laterally. Really hard for right-handed hitters to pick this pitch up, especially when it's sequenced with a fastball well. That's a really good pitch. But when you turn that over to the left-handed side, what happens is guys tend to have a little bit steeper swings, so they're able to stay inside that ball a little bit longer. And I'm still kind of understanding this and digging into it and asking some coaches about it. But the general theory that I like the most is that, like, think of like a Brandon Belt who has a really like lateral, like vertical swing. They call it like a vertical bat angle. VBA is the metric, but I'm not going to get too deep into it. But he swings very vertically. If you pause a point of contact on Brandon Belt, his bat's almost like perpendicular to the ground, as opposed to like an Alex Bregman, where if you pause at that same location, the bat will be flat. The idea is that guys with more vertical bats, which are like the Freddie Freemans, generally where you go when you end up in a little bit more of like a power alley kind of guy, like a high K, maybe decent walk, high homer, Patrick Wisdoms of the world, you know, like those guys have a really good ability to stay inside those sliders, such that when you add a cutter to that repertoire, it becomes a little bit of a different pitch for them to pick up, and it's harder for them to pick up. So my theory is that I actually think the cutter is a great thing for him to add versus left-handed hitters and might neutralize them. I just think it maybe took him a while to understand that, or get comfortable with the pitch, or actually have it be a good pitch, because cutters are kind of funky. Not a lot of guys really throw effective cutters. Like Zach Wheeler is really good. He throws like a slider, but there's a portion of that pitch which is a cutter. He learned that from DeGrom. Like there's clearly some theory here on how it works and why it's good. But I'm super in on Alzolay. Like I think that it's kind of crazy to think he's now in the rotation. I mean, at the end of the day, like if not, then he's an absolutely dominant bullpen reliever, because you're not going to hit him as a righty. Like I would bet that 10 days a week. Like it's a really good slider, and like it's going to get right-handed hitters out, and I don't think anything will change that. So it's a matter of figuring out the lefty side. Yeah.
We love Alzolay. Like I love his stuff. Too, yeah. I mean, Joey Votto, I think, is batting like 800 in like that series. Like Votto just destroyed it. It was like, all right, like
I would imagine. That gets
maybe
right
skip
back to
that series.
Votto's like applauds Votto at point of contact. Like he looks a lot like Brandon Belt. Like those guys have a really good ability to stay inside those sliders. So like if that's a mistake pitch, or even if he gets fooled a little, the way his swing goes, he's able, if that pitch is like going in on his hands, they're able to sweep through it more and create higher danger opportunities. Whereas like if you're taking a Bregman and flipping him over to the left side and swinging, like he'll get killed by those sliders. But yeah, Votto's of the world, Freeman's of the world are just going to hammer him. But I think that the cutter, I think it's a good cutter. The cutter he was kind of mixing at the end of last year, it didn't have the best results. I think that a pitch like that can really help him out.
So you last year around this time, you released your top 20 prospect rankings.
Yeah.
When's this year's going to be dropping?
Yeah, I think we're shooting for that probably right around the start of the season, maybe right before the start of the season. The problem is I'm not sure how much is going to change there, unfortunately, because like I don't know how much new information we got at the end of the year. On the data side of things and such. There'll probably be some movement with a guy like Triantos and such. Christian Hernandez, like I'm hoping I could wait and get some early Arizona looks from scouts at him and incorporate that into the ranks, because like I think everyone's still kind of in the dark on him. We've seen some pictures and some swings, but like he literally has not, like I think these last couple of weeks have been the first time he's taken like batting practice in the States and such. So like the eyes on him are really, really light. So I don't anticipate too much movement on that. Maybe just some improved blurbs and stuff of how I'm talking about some of the guys, but it should be pretty consistent. We might expand it out a little to like 25 or 30, which would be fun, because I ranked like upwards of 40 guys, and we decided to only take 20. So we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah. So I guess to kind of like preface your top 20 list, I've got some rapid fire questions.
Here, yeah, totally.
Okay. So we can elaborate on any of these after if you want, because I definitely want, if you have deeper opinions, like I'm really curious. So we'll start with favorite hitting prospect.
Favorite is interesting. I'd say my favorite is Kevin Alcantara.
Yeah. I guess we can.
You can dig it if you want.
You say that, and then Jake's like, I want to dig in.
Good one, right?
No, I mean, I'm thinking about how you said, favorite is different than best, but I guess like when I say favorite, I guess like if you're projecting in the Cubs system, who do you see like with the best upside, the best hitter upside?
That's where I was going with on favorite. It was Kevin Alcantara.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. I think. I might even crazy say Alcantara's upside is a little higher than Brennen Davis, but I guess there's like a smidge of where that could be possible.
I'll take it.
It's a really high outcome probability, and the Brennen Davis floor is much higher, much higher. Like I can't understand how much higher it is. It's not a knock on Brennen Davis at all. I just think like the raw tools of an Alcantara and his body type are something that you don't really see a lot. And like he's kind of, in my opinion, he's like a Jose Martinez-y kind of guy. Where the Cubs got really a bad example of Jose Martinez when they signed him, I think in 2020, where he was like he was on his way out, and he just didn't look good. But like the old Jose Martinez, the guy who really good OBP, super lanky guy, had some power. Like you could get an Alcantara version that is like that, who's able to cover a bit of the plate with his arm length and stuff, and hit the ball incredibly hard. Like I think he has really, really high upside to convert into like a solid like 3 to 4 win outfielder, which would be a really, really nice get for them from the Rizzo trade.
Yeah, I like that. So then on the opposite side, favorite pitching prospect. It's probably harder for you.
Yeah, this is tough. I feel like there's a lot of guys I've touched on here in various forms. I'll go a little off the radar just because I've kind of turned on him recently and Fangraphs turned me on to him, so credit to them. Is Drew Gray, the 2021 third rounder. I think that in 2020, when the Cubs overhauled a lot of their player development on the pitching side, you started to see them actually push towards guys who I think are a little bit more of the modern pitcher. And I feel like Drew Gray ends up in that territory really nicely in terms of what he mixes from the left side with his slider fastball. So I really like that combination. I think that Fangraphs is pretty spot on in putting him like top 20. I think I'll maybe be right around there with him. But the upside there is really good. Kantrowitz actually killed this draft from the first 3 rounds, from what I understand and have seen and have heard. Just really good. Like, I don't think any other team in baseball has been able to convert like 3 of these guys to potential like 45, 50 future guys, value guys from the scouting perspective, which is incredible for the first 3 rounds of a draft. So I think I'll go Drew Gray, but there's so many directions I could go there. I feel like I've always been high on Anderson Espinoza. I still feel like that's 4 pitches, each of them grade out at kind of around average on the stuff side, which I really like. And he throws really hard. And like, he's run into so many injuries and everyone discounts him because of that. But like, I guess there's a chance that he turns it around. I mean, I just think it's in there. And if he could stay healthy and like actually continue throwing 4 pitches, which he's throwing, like there's just not a lot of guys in the system who are throwing 4 pitches that are all pretty good. So that pops for me. So I'd go Espinoza or I like Drew Gray a lot, but there's so many directions I could go on that one. Palencia is really fun. I like his fastball. There's a lot of them.
Yeah, it's exciting. I mean, it's good that we have like that many options as Cubs fans. It's been a while. It's been a while.
Yeah. It's funny because they're all around the same tier too. So there's really no like, yes, the Brennan Davis of the hitting class. You know what I mean? So that's another thing where I think you're getting a lot of like favorites.
Well, and I feel like this season too. I mean, obviously with the 2020 lost season, I'm getting off track from the rapid fire questions here, but it's good. I think after the lost 2020 season in the minor leagues, guys kind of getting back on track. Obviously, there's some injuries in the system with pitching prospects last year.
Yeah,
I think that there are going to be some guys this season. I think it's safe to predict that there are going to be some pitching prospects that get to. There's got to be one in that huge corral to choose from that gets to a higher tier of prospect. What do you think? You're the professional.
Yeah, it's interesting because I wonder whether we've ranked some of those guys like the Killians and the Jensens of the world a little bit higher because of their floor rather than their upside. So I guess what you might see more is like pop-ups rather than like a Killian differentiating and becoming a top 5. No, let's say like contending for top 100 placement and overall lists. I don't know if we're going to get too much of that because I feel like the Jensens and the Killians of the world are like in a weirder spot in terms of like, you really need something to change drastically, and they have some performance against higher levels to kind of give us an idea what's going on. So unless you see like a new pitch there, I don't know. But like a DJ Hurst could pop up. That's another one I probably should have picked. I really like him from the left side.
We like him on the dingers.
Yeah, we love some DJ Hurst.
Yeah, I love DJ Hurst too. So like I think that you see maybe one of those guys differentiate. Like if DJ shoves again at higher levels and like he's still sporting 3-pitch mix, that changeup's still a really new pitch, as I talked to him about in that interview. Like that's a guy I could see differentiating as like the top prospect in the system pretty quickly, because he'll have performance probably at probably South Bend, hopefully above South Bend, maybe if we're lucky. So like you get 2 levels, 3 levels of performance over 2 years. That young, good curveball, fastball, deceptive slot, really good vertical movement, like on the fastball. Yeah, he might be the guy that I think has the best chance of differentiating himself as the top pitching prospect in the system because there's just more probability of variance there for positive upside, I think.
Yeah. So I know you said you don't really like to do this, but first prospect to make their Cubs debut in 2022.
Oh, interesting. I mean, the answer everyone's going to want to hear is Davis, but I feel like it's probably just going to be a reliever. Like I think I was looking at the depth chart the other day, and the pen is just. It's kind of like there's a lot of opportunity there. I'd love to see like a Ben Leeper. I'll go like cheesy answer and go Ben Leeper. Like fastball slider combo on that kid's incredibly good. Like that's like you want to sort through the system, look at modern pitchers, modern relievers. It's him. Again, he's another guy who's running some injury history, but he's like 95. It's almost solely fastball slider. He's just going to devastate righties. Like it's a really good slider. Like I just think he throws it hard and moves well. So I'd say like a Ben Leeper is a guy who could slide into the pen probably right away. So I guess I'd consider him in fringe prospect land if you want to toss all those relievers into a bin, which I tend to do between like the Broke Caraways and the Ben Leepers of the world and stuff. But yeah, he'll be my answer. I'd love to see Brennan Davis earlier rather than later, as everyone would. But I bet it's a reliever of some kind with some upside.
Yeah, good call. Good call. Best prospect in your eyes, you kind of maybe already gave it away. Best prospect acquired at the deadline.
Alcantara, yeah. If I'm loving him that much on the hitting side, probably him. I'll stick with that.
Yeah. Let's see, we got a couple more here.
Most slept on prospect in the Cubs system.
Yeah.
In the entire Cubs system, that's tough.
Or who's not being talked about enough, maybe is a better way to phrase it.
Yeah.
Ooh. I'm really interested to see some of these injury guys come off injury. Cole Franklin, Ryan Thompson, Michael McAveen. Just because I think some of them had decent pitch characteristics before. And like, you're just not going to get a lot of bullishness on them because their workloads might be a little capped because they haven't thrown in 2 years on live pitching for most of these guys. Because like alt-site stuff just doesn't compare to live in-game action from what I understand. So like that group is interesting just because they just don't have reps and we don't really know. But I don't know if I'd like throwing that on sleeper. Like sleeper and injury, I feel like often gets conflated a little bit. I'd probably go with we probably need to be talking about like a Luke Little a little more. Like he's another guy, again, if we're going off pure stuff side and just looking at like what plays right now on the pitch movement side of things in velo, like he's a horse. Like the dude is huge and he throws gas and he has nasty stuff. Like it's good. It's just he has no idea where it's going, which like you run into with a lot of these guys in the minor leagues. I mean, of course, I'm going to shout out Max Bain too. He's my dude.
Of course.
He's slept on, but I feel like he's built his brand up enough now where like you can't really say slept on anymore. I bet he'll laugh if he hears that. But like, yeah, he's not slept on anymore. He's too good. Like everyone knows about him. He's really good at building his brand. He's a great dude. He's on all these pods and stuff, and it's really been awesome. Like trying to create a positive image and influence guys to do the same thing, and I respect him a ton for that. So like, he's slept on because I think the stuff's great, but like he's not slept on because everyone kind of knows who he is in Cubs land. But yeah, I like a Luke Little. Palencia maybe is a sneaky dark horse there. He's another guy where I think there's some starter upside and the pitch mix is solid. I really like his fastball. That pops a lot. And he's throwing really hard today. He's up to like 98, 99 as a starter, which is amazing. As much as people want to say like the velocity side of things doesn't matter, it matters a lot. I think that's tied back to a lot of the injuries the Cubs ran into on the minor league side is like they realized when that 2020 regime came in with Breslow and other people that like velocity matters a lot. And they really tried to push that because they know that it's successful. It's the single most influential indicator of success if you're talking down to one variable. It doesn't mean it's the most, but it's like of the pie, it's probably the greatest portion. Just throw hard. So I will take a guy like Palencia who's hitting upper 90s out of a starting rotation a lot of the time.
Where does Little sit?
On like velo? A list?
Yeah, like velo. Like where is it sitting at? Like
I don't have the data, but I'm pretty sure he was up to 100 or something like that. I heard. Or like high 90s at least. It's just like it's like you want to talk like our tended zone on command side, like it's going all over the place, which it's fine. Like he's young, he's a really young dude. It's just I mean, like he figures out how to hone that in. You know, I don't even think he needs to hone it in that much. Like you look at a guy like a Lucas Sims from the Reds, like that dude's got no idea where the ball's going if you ever watch him start. But like his slider's devastating. He spins that thing like incredibly well. And like that's a guy where like you could survive in the major leagues with like well below average command if your stuff's that good. And I think Luke Little's stuff is that good. It's essentially like the short recap of him, I'd say. I have to confirm on the data side there. I don't want to talk something out, but I'm pretty sure he's upper 90s.
So this next one's pretty abstract. Okay. Who's making the biggest impact 5 years from now on this Cubs team?
Ooh. So biggest impact is in like
I guess we'll
5
say
years, who has the most wars, like most.
Yeah. I would say like on the team, like let's say like the 2027 season, who's projected to put up the most WAR? Yeah,
that's tough. I think there's a couple sneaky answers. I mean, Brendan Davis is like a really obvious one.
Yeah,
I do feel like that. I mean, I had Pete Armstrong 2 on the list because I just think the defensive pool is so high and the contact's there, and the Cubs love contact. Obviously, with the Nick Madrigal acquisition and such, like you could clearly see that. So, like, I think of Pete Armstrong's floor, like, if you want to go safe and kind of chicken out of that, like, in the 2027 season, I could see Pete Armstrong being a Gold Glove outfielder in, like, I'm going to check it here, but like a Kevin Kiermaier kind of way, but with more contact. So you're probably going to be able to hire OBP as opposed to Kiermaier, who's a bit of a swing and a miss guy. But, like, Kiermaier's had 6 to 8 years of positive defense. He's averaging, like, 2 WAR a year, 2 4-WAR seasons. Like he was really, really good when he was younger. He's an incredible defender. That's a Pete Armstrong area territory where he's like a 330 OBP guy. He goes like 15 and 20, 15 homers, 20 steals, and he's plus defense outfielder. And like it's not gonna pop. Like you're not gonna watch him every day at the plate and be like, man, this guy's like raking. But it's contribution, it's OBP that's maybe a little bit above league average, and it's stellar defense. And I don't know. I think Wrigley's dimensions in the outfield are relatively small, so I feel like he's a guy who could just cover so much. So I think Pico Armstrong is a fun answer there, just because like you're kind of chickening out with the floor. It's like I don't think his defense is going to deteriorate, and like maybe he finds some power later in his career, runs into like a Brandon Crawfordy kind of 25 home run season, and next thing you know, you have Gold Glove outfielder, league average OBP 25 home runs. Like that's 4 WAR pretty easily. You know, like if you're projecting anyone else for higher than 4 WAR, like you're predicting him to be an all-star, perennial all-star. So really the only guys to be able to compete with that are like high upside Kevin Alcantara. Casey, I think, has the offensive upside. Love that dude, but the defensive position is a little bit like what's going to happen there, which I think, again, limits the WAR production at the end of the day. So I like Pico Armstrong, but the obvious answer is Brendan Davis.
We got one more rapid fire. Just MLB. Who is your top prospect in MLB right now?
Oh, I love Bobby Witt. I'm a Bobby Witt guy.
It's kind of I feel like it's no. It's him or Julio Rodriguez, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Adley's a good one too, just because the catcher stuff's always funky. But yeah, I'm still a little bit uncertain how potentially RoboZone stuff influences catcher framing. If he's a really good framer, comes up as a framer, and he loses that skill, then like my understanding is there's going to be a greater population of guys who could catch. So you'll run into more guys who like just set up middle, let the guy throw it over the plate, and let the ball strike zone tell where it is. And like I'm just going to try to mash and be better than OBP. So like that might screw up his value. Game managing, of course, is a huge thing in that for the catchers. But Bobby Witt's like all his batted ball metrics are insane. Like makeup's fantastic, playing a premium position. I just love that dude. I think he's gonna pop. I think he's immediately gonna pop and end up in like, I don't want to say he's gonna end up in Fernando Tatis area, but like some of the hard hit numbers on him are pretty identical to what we were seeing in the minors from a Tatis or equivalent kind of player. So I'm in on him for sure. Julio Rodriguez is also really fun. There's a pretty good debate there, but I'm going Bobby.
Watching Bobby Witt take batting practice at the Iowa Cubs Stadium,
a ton this year.
the ball, like it sounded different. Yeah. Like you're sitting there listening, and you just hear it. Like, yep, that's a different swing. That's
Royals got one. That whole Royals minor league system, I think they're a team that's up and up. Prado, Melendez, Pasatino, like they're legit. That team's gonna bop for a really long time.
And if those pitching prospects have a better showing this year, watch out for the Royals because they've got
they got Angel Lacy in the minors too. Everyone kind of forgot about him. Yeah, it's a great point.
Yeah, I got so we kind of have talked about the Cubs' current rotation. We obviously talked about Alzolay. We talked about Hendricks. Mentioned a little bit of Mills. Talked about all the guys there. But from your perspective, is there still a hole in the Cubs rotation? Do you think that the combination of Alzolay, Thompson, Steele, and Abbott are enough to shore things up? If not, is there a specific free agent out there that you're still interested in?
Ooh, that's a good question. I didn't really do too much prep on that one. I think it's good enough. I guess I'm more on Justin Steele than I am on Keegan. I don't think Keegan has the stuff to survive. It's just my opinion. Like, I think he's a good dude, and I think he could totally end up being a major leaguer for a really long time. But like, I just don't think he was missing enough bats. Really, like I think he maybe was, but some of the predictive metrics around how he was missing that bats isn't particularly sustainable. Whereas like Steele's a little bit more deceptive in terms of how he was throwing. I thought the slider was really good. Slider curve mix. He had a little bit more feel for spin than Keegan, in my opinion. I think there's a greater chance Justin Steele makes a little more of an impact. So I'd say if you're telling me health's fine on those guys, I think Steele and a Steele-Alzolay combo for that spot there is perfectly fine. I'm trying to think of other starters that are still on the market that would be interesting.
Yeah, I should have put it in the notes, but
yeah, if there's any, let me see if I can pull up a list quick and see if anybody pops off the top of my head. But yeah, I'm not sure on the starter market side of things. Killing could come up. I'm trying to think of other high level starting pitchers. Corey Abbott's another guy. I know he's really into design stuff. He's got a pretty pop and maybe do something a little more interesting that he did last year. He was tossed between the rotation and the pen so much last year too. So many guys were. Yeah. It's just the workload stuff around all the injuries that popped up. It's so difficult for these guys sometimes. Where it's like we're looking at, did Abbott have a routine? Like what % of last year did Abbott have a routine? And like I know he got beat up pretty hard at the major league level, but like in 2021, he was still K'ing a ton of guys in AAA. Like the bouncing of the in and out of the rotation is just brutal for guys, especially jumping between outside and stuff. So I still don't mind Corey Abbott and stuff, which may be a little bit of a hot take because he hasn't performed well. But
he finished the year. Abbott finished the year really well.
Yeah, exactly. That's
in September.
That's the routine argument there. Is like maybe he's got a routine late and he's good. I don't know. He's an interesting one. You got a list of free agent pitchers for me? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm on I don't even Spot Rack, Spot
Track. Spot Rack, yeah.
Yeah. One guy that actually comes up here, left-hander, Brandon Finnegan, kind of flashed for a second with the Reds. Kikuchi, we've talked about him a little bit, but his savant data looked pretty rough last year after a strong start.
I like Kikuchi. Kikuchi's a driveline guy. I got to support my driveline guys.
Okay.
Yeah, Kikuchi was interesting. Yeah, xFIP on him is much lower than FIP. He got hammered on the homer side of things. Kikuchi's a fun one. I'll put my name in on him. Super diverse pitch mix. I'd imagine if he's at driveline, all those pitches are probably shored up pretty nicely. Yeah, I'd go Kikuchi. That's a great one. I forgot about him. Yeah, fastball cut, change slider. Velo's good on fastball. I'd have to look at some of the pitch shapes on the slider to see how that thing pops. But he's like a good natural homer regression guy. If he suppresses homers a little more, that's interesting. He's really interesting.
There are a couple Pittsburgh names too. Chad Kuhl and Steven Brault were two guys that you think about guys that come in. We talked about it earlier on, guys coming out of Pittsburgh. If you get them in the right place, I mean, one guy that drives me nuts, like, man, I want Mitch Keller. Like, obviously,
I used to love him as a prospect. Yeah,
he's an Iowa boy.
I'm a big fantasy player, and I've got him on my dynasty team. And oh my god, I'm just like, brutal, I want to put together so bad. And Cool were two guys that were like, they always like kind of showed maybe something's there, but I wonder if those would be guys that go to another organization and can show something off.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen a lot of them pitch against the Cubs last year. I feel like we ran into a lot of those Pirates games I was watching. I don't know if I have too strong of an opinion on either of those guys.
I think Cool was injured. Actually, both those guys were injured most of last season.
Cool, if I remember correctly, Cool was the one who had some more interesting stuff from my perspective. Yeah, another guy with homer problems. He was canned more than Brault. Yeah, I guess I'd go Kikuchi over those, but Kikuchi's going to be a little more expensive. Interesting. Yeah, there's definitely some options out there. It's just a matter of like what the Cubs think they can identify and change with a guy reliably. And I also think like you're running into a bit of an issue here where it's like a lot of pitch design stuff and a lot of these sessions that guys go through are done in the off season. It's relatively rare to see them done in season. So whenever you see a guy like I was like at a cutter in season, like that's a little bit of like he's got to put in a ton of work to do that, because you're doing that on top of your daily routine and your other maintenance stuff to just keep yourself healthy. So like when guys add pitches or reshape pitches in season, sometimes it's just like, oh, I'm back to normal or cue on it. But like if they actually worked on a new pitch with Owsley, which I assume they did on that cutter, that's a ton of work and dedication from that guy to actually execute that change. So the other thing I'd say is like some of these free agent guys, it's like a lot of teams might just be looking at him like what he was is what he will be. Or they might be looking at him and going like, what is a really small change we think we can make, you know, to like elicit a better result. Cause like, they're not gonna have time to go through a full pitch scrape down and rebuild, you know, like they can't, if they don't like what they're seeing with Brault or Cool, like, I just don't think the team's going to acquire them because they're not going to have time to be like, we want to reshape your fastball to this and then reshape your slider to this. Like you're not going to have communication with Cool until whenever this logout's over. If that's the end of February, mid-February, like you got a month and a half to get him in a rotation. It's like maybe we run into some scenarios where he's sharing time with like the fifth starters of Steele and Owsley of the world, and then maybe they like extended spring him. I don't know. That just seems a little weird. I imagine a lot of these guys are going to want major league contracts. So yeah, that's tough. It's a tough scenario. The lockout's kind of. I mean, I feel like we were like finally getting a normal offseason. Of course we don't, because the lockout. It's like 20. We're going to be like 3 years since the last normal offseason. We actually get like team interaction with players to achieve player development goals they want to achieve. It's like Jesus Christ.
Right.
Well, I don't want to take any more of your time, and we have a lot to sift through because, like, man, thank you so much for like just meeting with us, talking to us, and your knowledge and everything. Like, it's great. I could listen to this all day. I'm sure Jake is like eating this up because he loves all this data analytics and digging deep into prospects and all that stuff. It's great, and I think our listeners need to hear it, and they need to hear that there's a lot of things in our system that we have to look forward to, and we have a plethora of pitching and some guys like Brendan Davis that we're excited to see this next year. So thanks for joining us. We really appreciate you hopping on. Where can they find you on Twitter or the social medias?
Yeah, Lance Broz is. I think all my stuff's linked up on that. I don't do too much on Insta. Pretty big on Twitter. I link everything through there. Check out my YouTube. I'm doing some stuff this
YouTube
season.
Content.
Yeah, that's the thing that I've been pushing a bit. So just search me. My DMs are open to on Twitter. And if you got any questions, I'm always happy to chat and kind of explain some stuff. Because it helps me when I talk to somebody who doesn't understand something. because then I'm like, I try to think of a different angle of like what I could do better to improve the way I'm communicating it. So that's something I'm always looking for, is people who don't like what I'm talking about. So boom. That goes against a lot of people who don't like analytics, which is exactly who I want to hear from. You don't like analytics, you don't agree with what I'm saying, let's talk. I'm happy to chat for whatever.
And check him out on Marquee Sports Network.
Yeah.
We love Marquee Sports Network. Glad the Cubs are on there. And but thanks for joining us, Lance.
Anytime.
Appreciate it. Well, Jake, man, that was a lot. And that was a lot of great information. And I'm gonna have to re-listen to it.
Yeah.
And like kind of figure out like, okay, what is something that I'm really gonna grab onto, and really I want to dig into a little bit of the data and see like pitch mixes, and looking at like Killian. I want to go back and watch that AFL game, the championship game, and see if I notice anything in his pitch mix. And
well, it's tough too. I mean, he was talking about some stuff. He talked a lot about command and stuff. And thanks to my fantasy baseball angle, I know Eno Saris, great fantasy baseball writer, if not one of the best, has metrics called Command Plus and Stuff Plus, which he shares on The Athletic. I don't know if that data is available to us yet. If it is, I don't know where. But I think that's what Lance was talking about. And I meant to ask, and I didn't get a chance to, but I mean, it just is. It's great to see all this data being utilized. And obviously for Marquee to hire a guy like Lance, it shows that the Cubs are really embracing analytics, outside of the organization too. I mean, it's being talked about on Marquee now, which is really important. And I'm really looking forward to guys leaving organizations. I don't want them to leave their jobs, especially if they're with the Cubs, but I'm looking forward to these guys in organizations to come out into the media and talk about what's going on behind the scenes. I'm so curious. Like if I could get in on that pitch lab and just like sitting there for a day, like, oh man, that'd be awesome. But, and it was encouraging too. Like the question you asked about, is hitting, when is hitting going to come back, take the forefront, and what's going on there. There's a lot of stuff that he talked about that I didn't really realize was going on. I mean, the angles of the swings is probably stuff that I should know about, but maybe it's just not really being talked about that much. So that was a great.
Well, that's where an analytical guy like him, that he goes and looks at all that stuff, is key to be able to have that information out for us. Yeah. Just the fan. And I hope Marquee starts using him a little bit more in game to break down some of those type of things. Yeah. Those are the things I think we're missing. And like, for me, like I'm not a huge data analytic guy. I just love baseball, but now like he's a person that can really give that information in such a way that one, I can understand, and he explains it really, really well. And I think he's right. Being more on the video side, and for people like me that I don't like to dig into fan graphs and go through all the data and figure all that. It just takes up too much time. Like I don't have the time to do that. But if you can show me, like I'm all about it. Like show me video of a pitch mix and then how the cutter is working off the slider. Okay, I can understand that and see why they're trying to pitch shape those two together. Like I get that. Yeah. And so that's where he's going to come in key. And it makes like analytics and that stuff, you understand it more, why it's so important to look at all the data and then see how it plays into the game.
Yeah. Yeah. It'd be great. I mean, it'd be great to in broadcast see him break down pitch tunneling, the way that we see Pitching Ninja do on Twitter. It'd be great to see that. Here's why Alzolay is really effective today. If they can piece together a video of the overlays, mid game, that would get fans who aren't into analytics, because seeing that stuff is so intriguing. Like it's really cool. And the one thing that I had to remind myself as I'm sitting here thinking like, oh man, this guy knows so much. Like, yeah, it's his job, it's his job to know this much. I have to remind myself like, oh man, I'm not up to snuff. It's like, no. You have a day job. This is his day job, So it's cool to hear someone whose job it is to be up on all of this, answering our questions. So it was invaluable. Hopefully we can have him on again. That'd be a blast. Yep.
So tomorrow, do you think we're going to get good news with the meeting between the owners and the players?
I'm at a place where don't expect anything. Because then if anything good happens, then it surpasses expectations. It's a great Tuesday, right? So I don't know. I really don't know. I haven't read any breakdowns on what went on today, but I'll say I'm cautiously optimistic.
What I did hear is that they gave up a little bit, like they gave up the control for 6 years. They gave up that a little bit, the player side, which that's my whole thing with this is if both sides are stubborn, and we have to understand that it's the owner's game. It's the owner's game. Like whether we like it, we're pro player or pro owner, like from the majority of people, they're pro player. But we have to understand that it's the owner's game. Yeah. And I look at it as this way, as like the owners own the pie. And all the players want is a couple pieces of that pie. And I hope they look at it like this, that they can sign like a 6-year deal and get a couple pieces that they want. And hopefully in 6 years, then they can go after the rest of the part of the pie that they want. If they just go for all of it right now, they're not going to get it, and we're not going to have a season. So I like them showing that, okay, we want these things, and the owners are willing to go for those and give up a little bit now to hopefully get it later on.
Yeah. So I don't know. Hopefully we get some good news tomorrow.
Yep. All right. Well, that does it for this episode of the Dingers podcast. Thanks for listening. Go check us out on YouTube at Shy City Sports YouTube. Follow us on Twitter, Dinger Cubs. And yeah, thanks for joining us.